And we continue at 1:06 in the afternoon on the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wing has the day off. He'll be back with us on Monday. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is the Dean of the Sacramento Press Corps, columnist at Cal Matters, and you can follow him on X at Dan Cal Matters. Dan Walters, welcome.
Thank you very much.
You know, Dan, I think at this point there's now an entire section at bookstores dedicated to books about Joe Biden and the last campaign, because every time you turn around, a new one is being released. I read one a couple of weeks ago that's titled Fight. That was written by Jonathan Allen and Amy Parnes, and it talked about Joe Biden's problems during the last campaign, the ins and the outs of what happened through the debates, the conventions, Trump being shot, Biden dropping out, Kamala Harris being brought in, all of those details. And one of the subjects that they really tackled was why exactly it was that Kamala Harris lost the election to Donald Trump. And basically, the conclusion that they came to was that she had a lack of vision for being in the race. That basically she was there because Joe dropped out, she was next in line, and because of the calendar, the Democrats didn't have time to have an open convention where other candidates could make their case and they could develop some sort of process to pick someone else to be the nominee. I want to read for you some of what they wrote regarding all of that. Quote, Harris had a chance to win, but she did not have the most fundamental premise of a presidential candidacy worked out, her reason for running. She did not articulate a vision for the country or the policy matrix that would have convinced enough voters to elect her. She did not have a counter to Trump's use of her own words and record to portray her as a liberal extremist, end quote. They went on to quote an unnamed Harris advisor who explained, quote, we were holding sand in the palm of our hand, and it was slipping out of the fingers slowly. I don't think we needed more time. We needed more sand. We needed more substance, and she did not have more substance, end quote. So you take those conclusions from that book, and then you fast forward to what's going on in California today, because the seat of California governor's office will become open in 2026 as Gavin Newsom is termed out and barred by term limits from running for re-election. It's an open field. She has expressed interest in the race, but says she'll need until the end of summer to decide whether or not she's getting in. And you look at these interviews about Kamala Harris as a potential gubernatorial candidate, and it talks about her resume. It talks about her legacy. It talks about how it would position her to run for president in 2028. It talks about how it would position her to be a foil for Donald Trump and to be booked on all the national shows. And nowhere does it talk about what her vision is for California, that she's thought through our problems. She feels that she has solutions to offer. None of that is even regarded as being relevant in the conversation. If she runs for California governor and repeats all of those same mistakes of not having the why, do you think it's going to be a minefield for her?
Well, it could be a minefield for her, and you're right. I think, unfortunately, the contest for governor in California next year, among the Democrats anyway, is likely to be basically who can use the word Trump as often most rather, and that would be a shame, because obviously California has a lot of issues that continue to fester year after year. Most of them, virtually all of them, were there when Gavin Newsom became governor, and most of them are going to be there when he leaves 19 months hence. And yes, we do need a governor. As I wrote in one column, the governorship of California should not be considered to be a consolation prize for losing the presidential contest. And you're right. Whoever runs for governor next year, not just Kamala Harris, needs to talk about these issues. There are about 6 of them at least. One could call existential. I mean, they're so important. They're crises. And and they're still there, and in some cases getting worse all the time. And whoever's running for governor needs to deal with that. And I think it's fair to say that when she was Attorney General, and also when she was a U.S. Senator, she really didn't pay that much attention to California issues. As the Attorney General, for example, during her period as Attorney General, there were a number of crime issues that arose in the legislature and on the ballot, and she did not participate in any of that. So you would think the Attorney General would want to weigh in on criminal justice issues, but she didn't do it. She wanted to just highlight the things that I think she thought were more, I don't know, sexier politically or something like that. And as a U.S. Senator, she basically ignored California's issues. Dianne Feinstein carried the water for California, and which is also, by the way, something of a tradition in California, that one senator is kind of the show horse out there making headlines, and the other senator is the workhorse who takes care of California issues. And during that period, for many years, it was Dianne Feinstein taking care of California's issues. And the other senator, both Barbara Boxer and later Kamala Harris, they were off making headlines for things that had nothing to do with California. So her record of dealing with California issues is scant, virtually non-existent. But if she runs for governor, she should do something about that. She should say what she wants to do about homelessness and water supply and rising interest rates and on the education deficiencies that are terrible in California. All of these issues, housing, homelessness, these are all issues that need to be addressed by the next governor of California, because they're still going to be there 19 months in. But it's going to be attractive to her to garner support from Democratic voters just to go Trump, 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 Trump. And that would be, I think, political malpractice if she just tries to do that. And if California is willing to elect a governor who just does that, does deal with California issues, shame on us.
Let's say she runs and let's say she wins. You mentioned those 5 or 6 issues that are at the level of what we could describe as a crisis right now. Right. If she thinks that she's going to get elected and then just spend her time on Meet the Press or spend her time on MSNBC or CNN just reacting to whatever Donald Trump is doing that day, well, the insurance crisis is going to get worse. The state's budget is going to be more upside down than it already is. The homelessness issue is going to get worse. Crime's going to get worse. Education's going to get worse. And then she is going to have a record that you can pin on her. It's hard to pin a specific record on a vice president. It's hard to pin anything other than a partisan down-the-line voting record on a U.S. senator. But if I can't buy insurance for my house in California, and a lot of other people can't too, you can pin that on the governor because that's their responsibility. And that's not a record you want to run for president on.
No, and that's one of the issues. Does she, even whether she runs or not? The other question, of course, is this just going to be a precursor to another campaign for the White House in 2028? I would guess, and I'm just guessing, that if she does run, and she announces she's going to run, that will be question 1. Do you intend to run for president in 2028? Or do you intend to serve out at least 4 years as governor of California? And she's going to have to answer that. And the other thing about this whole thing is maybe it would be, if she wants to run for president again in 2028, maybe the better thing would be to not run for governor, because being governor of California is a minefield. I mean, suddenly all these things are dumped on you, and you're going to be held accountable for them, whether you like it or not, and that's not going to be a good way to be running for president. So if you really want to run for president, you're probably better off just running for president and not trying to run for California governor. It just doesn't work very well when you think about it. So I think that's really the decision she has to make. She's got 3 choices. She can retire, become a corporate director of some kind and make lots of money, or get on a speech tour like the Clintons did. She could run for governor, or she could run for president. And she's got 3 choices there. And it's getting kind of irritating that she's not being forthright about a thing. We have other people who have already announced. They're kind of on tenterhooks because they don't know how to campaign. Can't even raise any money because everybody's waiting for Kamala, like waiting for Godot, right? In the old play, Waiting for Godot. And so that the delay itself is becoming kind of an irritant in the minds of many. Is what she's waiting for. If she wants to do it, do it. She doesn't want to do it, say she doesn't want to do it. This business about I'll just wait till what's magic about the end of summer? I mean, it's you're either going to do it or you're not going to do it. And if you can't make up your mind, you shouldn't even be thinking about it, really.
Antonio Villaraigosa, the former mayor of L.A. and current candidate for governor, a Democrat, is throwing some elbows both at her and the former Secretary of Health and Human Services, Xavier Becerra, saying that those two, among others, not being straight up about Joe Biden being senile caused the Democrats to lose the presidential election. And Kamala had lunch with Joe once a week. She should have known. If everyone around Joe knew that Joe was senile, she certainly should have known. But she kept quiet about it, and she's got to answer for that. What do you think the reaction is going to be? Do you think Democratic voters are going to say, you know what, Antonio has a point? Or do you think Democratic voters are going to react in a partisan sort of way and say, she's our Democratic vice president? How dare you say that about her?
Well, I don't know. Some voters probably hold her responsible, but in a way it's kind of inside baseball. And I'm not sure that it plays as a major factor in if she is running for governor of California. I'm not sure that's really a major factor. Look, he's got an easy out on the thing. Hey, he chose me as vice president. I had to be loyal to him, and I couldn't be disloyal to him. So I mean, people might say, okay, we understand that. She didn't have a duty to go out and out Joe Biden's cognitive failures. That was for somebody else to do, and that's understandable. I think you're vice president. You really have to, almost as a matter of the job descriptions, you have to be loyal to the guy who picked you. So I don't see that as a big thing. I really don't. I think there are other things that will be important in this campaign if she runs for governor. Villaraigosa is trying to make a point out of this. He's actually trying on several different levels to differentiate himself from the other candidates. He wants to stake out being the candidate of the Democratic central moderate bloc, of which there are many, and let the others be the relatively speaking, the lefties in the class. So I understand where Antonio is coming from, and it's a good strategy from his part. You have to remember one thing about this race next year, and that's the top two primary system. It's not a winner-take-all situation in that primary. The question is who comes in second. Even if let's assume that she gets in, Kamala gets in, and comes in first. Then the answer is who comes in second. And we saw that kind of dynamic last year with Adam Schiff and Steve Garvey and Katie Porter. Is that Schiff built up Steve Garvey as a great threat, thereby actually convincing a lot of Republicans, we ought to vote for Steve Garvey and maybe some other people too. And he got what he wanted, which was a relatively weak opponent in the November election. He did not want to run against Katie Porter. And he as a strategy, avoided having to run against her. And so the same dynamic will be in effect next year for the governor's race. The question is not necessarily who comes in first, but who comes in second. Will it be a Republican? Will it be another Democrat? And whether it's a Republican or Democrat changes the whole dynamic of the election.
Let's assume for a second that Kamala doesn't get in the race. Who do you think are the two candidates most likely to make it to November?
I would say that Villaraigosa and Katie Porter and Eleni, the lieutenant governor, are the three front runners in a Kamala Harris, no Kamala Harris. Those three are running. The others, I think, are basically also runs. Even Becerra, I don't think Becerra is a strong candidate. Frankly, he has zero, really almost zero name attention in California. He has to start from scratch. I got 99 people out of 100 would not even be able to tell you who he is. So I think he at this moment is kind of in the also runs, and those three I mentioned are the most likely people. Now the question again, that means we have a 1-2 Democratic runoff or a Democrat versus Republican runoff. And so in a way, the battle may not be so much for first place, but really for second place.
And do any of the Republicans have a chance at getting on the November ballot right now?
Oh, yeah, for the same reason that Steve Carvey wound up in the November ballot in the Senate race last year. If they're even maybe more likely, because there are a lot more Democrats running for governor than were running for the Senate last year. So if you have, say, 5 candidates running for governor, Democratic candidates, it's almost a guarantee that a Republican will be in the second place. If it's down to 2 or 3, that's a different story. But if there's still 5 Democrats or 6 running for governor, the chances of a Republican coming out on top are very, very strong. Or coming not on top, but on second place.
Dan Walters, columnist at Cal Matters. You can get him on X at Dan Cal Matters. Dan Walters, thank you so much for stopping by on this Friday. Always a pleasure.
You're welcome. Okay, bye-bye.
It's the John Phillips Show. It's the John Phillips Show on this Jimmy Buffett Friday. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And now that we're hitting the halfway point of today's show, if you want to continue listening to us all weekend long, all you have to do is subscribe to the show. You can do that on your handy-dandy iPhone. Listen to us in the pool, on the golf course, when you're on the exercise bike, whenever, wherever you want to. It's so easy to do, even I can do it. All right, here's a question for you at 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. Antonio Villaraigosa says Kamala Harris needs to come clean. You knew Joe Biden was senile. You had lunch with him every single week. Why didn't you say anything about it? And the way I see it, there's a couple of different reasons that she could have decided to keep it private. One, she's the vice president. She's going to be loyal to Joe. Joe is the one that brought her to the dance, and she's going to stick with the person who brought her to the dance. Number two is if she knew that Joe is senile and was in poor health, then she needed him to be president for her to become an incumbent. Because if Joel rolled to 7, she would then become the incumbent president and have a huge advantage as a candidate herself. And the third possibility is if she were to turn on Joe, Joe would turn on her. And if Joe turned on her, there's no chance Joe would ever endorse her for president. There's zero chance Joe would say that she did a good job as vice president, and Joe would be able to find a way to stick the knife in. Why do you think Kamala Harris didn't come clean about Joe being senile when she knew that was true? 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. Your calls coming up right here on The John Phillips Show. Inheriting a home can be overwhelming. Between repairs and the time it takes to get everything ready to sell, it can feel like more trouble than what it's worth. That's where Seller's Advantage comes in. One real customer who inherited a home shared their experience. Quote, "We had an inheritance from a relative. It would have taken us a lot of time, money, and headaches to get the property in shape to sell. I heard about Seller's Advantage from radio commercials and decided to give them a try. Their offer was reasonable, and we accepted it. They took care of all the physical effort and legal complexities. We closed within 3 weeks. I would highly recommend them to anyone," end quote. No matter what your reason is for wanting to sell, call Seller's Advantage today at 888-303-AS-IS. That's 888-303-AS-IS, 888-303-2747, or find them online at sellersadvantage.com for your free, no-obligation cash offer. DRE number 01961658. John Phillips Show on this Jimmy Buffett Friday. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number. 1-800-222-5222. Antonio Villaraigosa is aggressively going after Kamala Harris, saying she should have said something about Joe Biden's senility. And because she didn't say something, Democrats lost the election and Donald Trump will be president for the next 4 years. And he says if she's going to be the next governor of California, she has to say why she didn't say anything about that. And my question to you at 800-222-5222 is this. Why do you think Kamala Harris didn't say anything about Joe Biden losing his marbles? And I mentioned 3 potential reasons as to why she didn't say anything about it, but I want to elaborate on that for a second. Because if you're Kamala Harris, you're trying to sell yourself to the American people as someone who would be the best person to be in charge of the government, someone you can trust, someone you know who will have your back, someone you know who will lead us through a war if one were to pop up, who will make sure our economy is healthy, make sure the borders are secure, all of the things that a president is supposed to do. And you really have to trust them. If you don't trust them, why would you choose that person to be in charge of the free world? Kamala Harris began her political career as the other woman. Let's not forget that. She had a relationship with a married man who helped her in her political career, who greased the skids for her. There's a lot of women out there in particular who look at that and they go, whoa, that could have been my husband. Can I trust you? If you're willing to do that to someone else's family, why wouldn't you be willing to do that to me? So there's a level of distrust that exists with her just from the bio, just from knowing who she is and how she got here. And there's a lot of people who, even though they may not have not voted for her because of that reason may have been one of many that played into it, or maybe it's something that really didn't impact their vote at all, but it was something that was just there in the back of your head, something that you were aware of that when it's relevant pops up from time to time. Don't forget, when she ran for president on her own against Joe Biden, Democratic voters did not vote for Kamala Harris. They voted for Joe Biden over Kamala Harris. In fact, there are a number of candidates in that race who did better than Kamala Harris. Was it because Democratic voters didn't trust her? I'm not sure. But there was a reason Democratic voters didn't choose her in that primary, and they chose Joe Biden instead. So if you take that background of someone who is suspect to begin with, and then you put her in a situation where, after getting really nasty with him in the primary, because don't forget, on that debate stage, when the subject of school busing came up, she basically called him David Duke. She basically said that Joe Biden was a racist. That's why Jill Biden doesn't like her. She never forgave her. And Joe Biden picked her in spite of that. Put her on the ticket, made her vice president of the United States, heir apparent to be the next Democratic nominee for president. So if you then take a woman with that background and put her in a situation where a guy that she went after aggressively forgave her and put her on the ticket, and then she stabbed him in the back too, that would be an awful look, a horrible look. And even Democratic voters who hate Donald Trump would have a problem with that. And then on the flip side, if she just pretends like she hears nothing and sees nothing and Joe's fine and everything's okay, that puts her in the strongest possible position. Because of that loyalty to Joe, when Joe was, let's not say when Joe chose to get out of the race, Joe was forced out of the race by Nancy Pelosi and Obama and others. When Joe was forced to step aside, if he didn't want his administration to be repudiated, The replacement had to be her. So you know if you're her, if you stay in Joe's good graces, for Joe to maintain his own credibility, has to pick you, you stick with Joe. Joe was never going to drop out and say, I think Bernie Sanders would be great. I know I picked the vice president, but she's not that qualified. So we're going to go with Bernie Sanders, or we're going to go with Gavin Newsom, or we're going to go with Gretchen Whitmer, or, all the people I should have picked instead, if not for my poor judgment. He's never going to say that. He was always going to get behind her. Whether he chose not to run for re-election a long time ago and she was a candidate for office, he would have gotten behind her. Or had he dropped out when he did, he was going to get behind her. Or if he dropped dead, the family would have gotten behind her. If you're her, maintaining a good relationship with Joe would give you advantages that you would otherwise not have access to. And for that reason, she had zero motivation to turn on him. Zero. And now that we know that he has cancer, with the type of cancer that Joe has, there's a pretty good chance that he knew about it, and there's a pretty good chance that Kamala knew about it back when he was president. So if you have someone who's mentally not there and has cancer and might be dead tomorrow, all the more reason to stay behind Joe. Because if Joe rolls a 7, if Joe drops dead, then there is no primary. You're the person. You're not only the Democratic nominee, you are the president at that point of the United States. So every motivation that she had, every positive benefit that she could have, lays with staying by Joe. Going against Joe would have been the riskiest thing that she could have done. And people say, well, then she was complicit in keeping someone in office who didn't have the cognitive ability to do the job. And the answer, the honest answer from her point of view, is she didn't care. She figured they'd figure it out. If something hit the fan, she figured someone in that room would respond in some way that would be acceptable. And if it didn't happen that way, oh well. But that's the only way that she was ever going to be the president of the United States or the Democratic nominee for president. That's my 2 cents. What say you at 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222? Why do you think Kamala stood by Joe and wasn't honest with the public about Joe being senile? Let's go to James in San Francisco. James, hello.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I think this whole thing is ridiculous. I'm they call me the Raging Cajun, but I'll tell you what, the Democrats don't know how to play games. They don't know how to shoot. They don't know how to play ball. I used to think we were people that knew what the hell we were doing. And now we're just a pile of gook. I can't handle it. I'll tell you what, that Kamala Harris, if she had played it cool, there's no way still in hell she would have been elected. That's bad news. And Biden didn't pick her. His advisors picked her. But this is war now. This is war. And I have no idea. The only person I could say who probably be president on the Democrat side where they can win is, unfortunately, Oprah, and she ain't going to run.
All right. Thank you so much for the call, sir. I appreciate it. 800-222-5222. You know how long it's been since Oprah's been on TV 5 days a week? I'm not even sure Oprah could win. 800-222-5222. Why do you think Kamala Harris wasn't honest about Joe Biden's senility when she was vice president? Antonio Villaraigosa says that's a question she needs to answer. I told you why I think she stayed quiet about it. Now it's your turn to weigh in at 800-222-5222. 1-800-222-5222. It's the John Phillips Show. It's the John Phillips Show on this Jimmy Buffett Friday. We're taking your calls at 800-222-5222. Let's begin with Julian in San Jose. Julian, hello. All right, let's go to Dale in Long Beach. Dale, welcome.
Hello, John. She had no incentive to say anything and every reason not to, just like you pointed out.
Yeah, I just don't see how she would benefit from blowing the whistle on Joe.
None whatsoever. All she had to do was hang in there long enough, he might drop dead, like you said. Now, I like Tony V calling her out, and so far he's on the top of my list as far as the governor. I don't like anybody else.
All right, thank you for the call, sir. Let's go to Patrick in Orange. Patrick, hello.
Hey, John. Happy Friday. How you doing?
Good. Happy Friday to you.
You know, they're all in lockstep with the cover-up, from the vice president to his aides to the cabinet to the media. They're all part and parcel, and they're all complicit in trying to pull the wool over America's eyes. I mean, it was obvious when what was he doing? He was campaigning from the basement. From that point forward, it's all been a sham, and it's all been obvious.
You know, it's funny that you mention that, because I think that there's a lot of truth to that statement. The only way that it wouldn't be obvious to everyone, including his voters, that he was senile was the fact that he was staying in his house. He wasn't changing time zones. He wasn't getting on an airplane. He wasn't sleeping in Hampton Inns. He wasn't waking up early and staying up late. He wasn't talking to a million different people. He got to live in his house. He got to sleep 9 hours a night. He got to only speak to 2 or 3 different people in person, so it wasn't like he could forget their names. It was the perfect storm for Joe Biden convincing the public that he was well enough to be president. If he ran in any other time other than COVID, I think that even the most left-wing partisan hacks on cable news would have to acknowledge that the guy wasn't all there.
I agree. And, it's just he gets to lay on the beach as soon as he lets go of the auto pen, and here we are today unwinding all the BS.
All right. Thank you for the call, sir. Let's go to Robert in Orange County. Robert, hello.
Yeah, hey, John. I think the problem was assuming that Biden and Harris were the ones in control. I personally believe it was the Obama administration. It was run by his loyalists, and Kamala Harris was beholden to what the people behind the scenes were calling out. And if she ever did become governor of California, the main reason I would oppose it is she would have to change the bear on the flag of California to a hyena.
All right. Thank you for the call, sir. Let's go to Don in San Mateo. Don, hello.
Hi, John. Thanks so much for taking my call. Great show today.
Thank you.
I was calling in today to comment about Kamala Harris and thank the good Lord that she was not elected president. But I wanted to comment on Joe Biden and him being pushed into the presidency, and how I really felt like that was it was elderly abuse. I think that was I don't care for his politics. I did not vote for him. But, my father's 85, and I would never have subjected him to that. They knew he was not capable of doing the job. They knew he was sick. And for Jill and his entire cabinet and all those that were pushing him to do so, I just think was completely unfair. And again, like I said, I did not vote for the man. I do not care for his politics. I wish him well. I hope he gets well. But they knew he was sick. And they pushed him into a position that he had absolutely no business being, and then forced him to try to run again. So I think the whole thing was one big card trick, one big game of shell game, and I'm extremely disappointed. I think if the Democrat Party had any morality whatsoever, they never would have allowed this charade to continue, and that's pretty much all I had to say.
Well, thank you for the call. I know there's a lot of people who think that behind the scenes, Obama or Jill Biden was calling the shots. according to these books, at least two of them, well, one that I've read and one that I'm halfway through, it wasn't those two. In fact, the books say that Obama and Biden had a very icy relationship. The books say that there was about 3 or 4 different advisors that Biden had that had a ton of power with him, and they kind of formed this little governing group that really was the group that called all the shots. But that Jill Biden also had an aide by the name of Bernal, who was a massive bully in the White House, who we had an unbelievable amount of power in that building. They were all afraid of him. None of them wanted to incur his wrath. And he always said that he was speaking on behalf of Jill, but that guy apparently had a say in everything that came out of that White House, and he was quite left-wing. Let's go to Travis in Oakland. Travis, hello.
According to Harmeet Dillon, Kamala got into Hastings Law School based on a scholarship meant for people with mental disabilities. So could it be possible that Kamala Harris was the only person on the planet that didn't know that Joe was out to lunch permanently, you know?
I guess that's a possibility that I didn't even bring up, that she actually thought that he was sharp as a tack.
Yeah, and if that's the case, her being governor is pretty scary. It'll make gruesome Newsom look smart. So that's frightening.
Yeah, well, I guess Joe is the sharpest spoon in the drawer in that scenario. Let's go to Ken in San Jose. Ken, hello.
Hello, thanks for having me. You know, Kamala Harris didn't say anything because she was told not to. And the people that told her not to were from Congress, the House and the Senate, from Schumer and Pelosi people. Because if you look at it, Schumer said that he put in 230-some or 40-some progressive judges, right?
Oh, yeah.
Now, with that being said, having the progressive judges, when did Biden and Trump have their debate? Earlier than normal?
That was because the Biden people wanted to have it earlier, not the Trump people. It was the Biden people that wanted that to happen. And as it turned out, that was a big mistake. Although if they had it later on, I don't think it would have been any better. Thank you for the call, sir.